It takes like a hot second.
Okay, it's official. We are live and we are in the green room.
Ooh.
Stakes are pretty low. Oh boy. So yeah, like I was telling you before, Alan, not to peek behind the curtain for everybody listening now, those nosy Nellies, but we're in the green room. So, while we're waiting for everybody to sort of filter in, now this question came up on a previous show of mine that I think will fit into this genre pretty well.
Okay.
So the question was posed by me to a friend of mine because he was playing this video game where he's got a camera that can, like, if you take a picture, you can go back to it and have 30 seconds to dick around, or it was some sort of time manipulation. And I was like, okay, that's cool, but Goosebumps had a camera that if you took a picture of someone, it would show you how they died, and not only that, it would almost like force the hand of fate upon them.
Okay.
So here's the question. Which camera do you personally pick? Do you want a camera that you could relive a point in time that you took a picture of for 30 seconds to make a slight change? Or do you take the murder camera to, settle some scores? If you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer because there's a lot of nuance in this question.
Well, you didn't give me many choices. Kind of like, subjective stuff. I would have to go with the 30-minute camera. I wouldn't go with now, let me understand this correctly. The murder camera allows me to commit a murder?
Well, that's a good question. So the murder camera is essentially a cursed Polaroid. So it works out to kind of like a monkey's paw type situation where you take a picture and it comes out and you go, oh, that's weird. That's not what the person was doing in the photo. And you take a quick look at the thing after it develops. And, there's maybe it's not always murder, but something horrible has gone wrong to the person. So it's a camera with a curse. Whereas I'm not sure what the technology behind the time traveling camera is. I assume also magic.
Probably.
I'd have to do the 30-second. I'd have to do the 30-second one. I'm not, I don't like curses. So, God, that's a weird question. That is a weird question.
But important because, true crime, it's like, because here's the thing. Both of these cameras can work for a true crime scenario. So let's say you take a picture of someone, you run over and you stab them a whole bunch and you go, aha, murdered you. But then you look at the photo and you go back and then you decide not to murder them. So, bam, there's your...
That's like asking if your knees bent the other way, what would a chair look like? Okay.
Oh, that would look like a weird box with no sides.
Yes, it would. No, I'd have to do the 30-minute. If there was something that could take a picture and give me an advantage as far as a clue on a true crime, that's the one I would go with, rather than just the monkey's paw thing. Well,
the time traveling camera wouldn't necessarily give you a clue. What would happen is, to my understanding anyway, once the photo is taken, and I'm also going to make up the rest of this, if you look at the photo hard enough, I imagine you could transfer yourself back to that time period to remake the decision you made. It wouldn't necessarily give you it's basically giving you a free redo.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But here's
David,
the rub.
It's Friday night, man. You're asking me to think too much. I think that, honestly, I think that the time travel camera would. I've always been interested in time travel, so and from what I'm told, it does exist. I don't know how, but I'd take that camera. Do you have another question? Maybe we could move on to that I could get the right answer for.
There's no right or wrong answer to the camera one. Although the murder camera was the right answer, so sorry about it. But
that's all right.
Whack, whack.
No, it's just something that I like posing questions of two equally fantastical and unrealistic situations because more often than not, it'll give you more insight into the person you're talking to than if you go, hey, what's on your mind? Because then they can blow smoke up your ass. If I say, do you want a time traveling camera or a murder camera? You can't walk around that question.
That's true.
No, you can't.
If I go, hey, what'd you do today? You go, oh, I read the paper and I had half a grapefruit. And that's boring. But if I say, hey, you want a murder camera with a curse? Or do you want a camera where you can essentially, but here's the rub that I didn't tell you and you didn't ask about, but the thing about these time traveling cameras is when you travel back in time, you're still aging. But since you're traveling back, everyone goes back to their age they were before. So you're aging incrementally each time you use it. And everybody else gets to stay the same age.
That's basically the price you pay for using the camera.
Yeah.
But also, don't take a picture with anything reflective with the murder camera because then you're dead.
Yeah, this did come up. So the thing with the murder camera is you never, or not never, but you always want to be on guard because if there's a mirror or a shiny object or a piece of aluminum foil that catches you in it, the monkey's paw can, take a hold of you.
Okay.
That's why there's a lot of
y'all don't have a social life much, do you?
Not really.
You're thinking up these cameras.
This is pretty much it.
No, I'm just kidding. But, I do it. I think about going back in time all the time. Especially if you and Krista knew back in December, I lost my brother.
Yeah.
So kind of. I did talk to him the day before he passed away, but I'd kind of like to have a conversation with him. And
time travel is something as weighty as just about every other human thing. But, and don't get me wrong too, because I know Troom, I'm dropping his name, but I know a kid who is like gaga over physics and stuff. And we would have long conversations about the dynamics and the plausibility of time travel. Mm-hmm. And I think he was, we both sort of landed on this one thing where if you make a machine now, from now on, moving forward, you can come back to now. But that machine has to exist to catch you. Mm-hmm. If you don't, then you're sending ripples through the universe that will literally rip the fabric apart.
Well, I don't know if you saw the movie Somewhere in Time with Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour and Christopher Plummer.
But now that I know that Jane Seymour's in it, I'll have to watch it.
It was a movie about a playwright who his life was kind of falling apart, and he goes to open a play. And at the play, this old woman walks up and she tells him, "Come back to me." Mm-hmm. Well, he goes to this hotel that had a theater in it for 100 years. And he sees this picture of Jane Seymour in period costume. And her name in the movie, I never forget, was Elise McKenna. And he starts going to his professors and saying, "Is time travel possible?" And one of the professors says, "If you think yourself there, you will be there."
Whoa!
Well,
Wait a
he
minute.
goes to a costume shop, gets an old, 1912 suit with a derby hat and old coins, and he goes to this. He comes to find out he was there in 1912.
Wild. Okay.
He went through the registers that they had, and he saw his name. Name was Richard Collier in the movie, and he found out what room he was in. So he goes and he asks to have that room, and then they go up to the attic and they bring down all this antique furniture that was in the room, and he lays there and he just wishes himself back and wishes himself back. So I'm not going to tell you the ending because it's very depressing. But
well, if I may spoil it, because here's the thing: when you said that, I was like, "Oh my God, I know this!" Not having seen that movie, because American Dad had an episode in which Steve, the young child, sees a woman in one of those, those paintings that hung in salons in the 80s of the really aggressive white makeup and the really jagged hair on the ladies. Mm-hmm. He basically dresses up like Marty McFly, lays on a bed, and travels back in time that way.
Yeah.
And then, spoiler alert, the woman
is meowing.
Oh, yeah.
Stop it.
But spoiler alert, the woman he fell in love with was him.
Woo! Dee Dee's here.
Whoa. Okay.
Welcome, Dee Dee. All right, so now it's been over 5 minutes, so we're going to go ahead and get this baby rolling.
You're listening to FFOP Radio.
Reach the
Hey everybody, and welcome to the show, the official show, not the green room. This is the real show. And, it's another Flamingo Friday. I forgot to wear flamingos because I wore my special vest. But, whatever. It's a holiday. There's a flamingo on the mask back there. But here's the thing. You've heard him talk. You've read I mean, you wouldn't be here if I didn't tell you to show up. You know what's going on. So let's not pretend like we're holding out on anything. Joining me this episode is, you may remember him from a couple podcast episodes ago. We got Alan Gauthreaux, the host and curator of True Crime Man's Dark Imagination. Welcome back on the show, Alan. Of course, Chris is in studio. You can see her there on the camera.
Hey, I'm here. I have the flamingo shirt on.
Yeah, there's enough flamingos in the studio to cover all our bases.
Yeah.
So now, obviously, you showed up. It's time for some true crime, and we're definitely one, maybe two cases. So, first of all, Alan, give everybody a little recap about your channel, just in case we have newcomers. I don't know if Dee Dee or anybody else was in the last genre visit here. So tell us what is your show about, and a little detail. Mm.
What, 4 or 5 days ago? 4 or 5 days ago.
Right.
And,
Okay.
David's is coming up. I'm still working on his. So it's a good channel. I like it. You know, I mean, like I said, you still get people that are a little, naysayers. They don't like it, or they're experts. There's going to be experts around every corner.
Yeah.
So,
thank God we have the internet, because everybody's an expert because of it. I think we lost our sound a little earlier. Sorry, guys, but we're going good now. So, but yeah, I want to say this, full disclosure, this is not going to be like a biased look at Alan's channel, because I fucking love it. Like, I love your channel. I love your stuff. I was watching all of your, all the videos for the topics we were going over today. And it's been this was probably the 6th time I've watched the Axeman video, but it's been like a month or so since I ran through your catalog, and I was like, okay, I've seen them all like 3 times. I'll move on to something else and then come back later. But let's just crack into it. So the first case is the Axeman of New Orleans. Mm-hmm. Now, boy, oh boy. So why don't you give us a little context of time period and where we are at, and then I'll start picking your brain about the finer details.
Well, it's 1918, and the United States is just entering World War I.
Right.
And we see a lot of, in New Orleans, I mean, of course, we've always been known as the Big Easy. There's a lot of jazz. And all of a sudden, out of the shadows, there comes this demon. I call him Demon in the Dead of Night. And he is just the first murder, actually, the first one that is people attribute to him was on May 24th, 1918. And it's where an intersection of 2 streets meet. Mm-hmm. And it's an Italian grocer. Well, the first thing that pops up is people think it's the mafia that's killing these Italian grocers or something like that. Well, the mafia doesn't kill women because there was Catherine Maggio,
right,
and
Joseph.
And her husband Joseph Maggio were killed. So and their throats, they were hit with an axe, and their throats were sliced. One of the brothers who actually found the bodies, he was drunk because he was going to war. So when this starts, no one law enforcement, the population is not prepared for it, period.
For sure.
They don't know what to do with a serial killer. That term hadn't been coined yet. So that was the first murder. And
well, so so let me ask you this, because all the sources are kind of, this happened first and that happened first. So was it the razor across the throat first, or I would assume it would be the razor, because then why would you do the axe and then the razor?
It was the axe.
Yeah,
the axe first.
Yeah, I read it was
it's
his
more
axe.
of a weapon of surprise.
Okay, because I got more than two. I got like 6 different sources.
Yeah.
All were flip a coin whether the axe or the blade was the first weapon used.
Well, actually, no. It was the axe. The axe. More, if you look at the wounds. In fact, I covered it, and I know you didn't want to make this a rah-rah for the True Crime Channel, but in my first book, Italian Louisiana, I went into a little detail, and it was actually the axe first. It was a weapon of surprise in the dead of night. They didn't see them. There was also a question as to how the Axeman actually got into the house.
Right.
Okay. And I used a little bit of that when I started talking about Valiska. We talked about, but see, I told you Valiska was going to come into it a little bit.
Axes, run in pairs.
Well, yeah, but the mode of entry, how did the killer get into the house? Unless the killer was in the house to begin with. All right. So it was the axe first and then the razor. And the razor happened to belong to one of the brothers that actually found the bodies.
Right, because he was a barber, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, it's you're either a barber or a grocer back then. And so they kind of tried to pin it on the brother, but I don't think he was in any condition to kill anybody. He was selling.
Yeah, I don't think that, because that's one of the through lines that you'll see as we go through the Axeman is like at every turn, every murder scene, it's just like they look around, see someone within 8 feet of the crime scene, they go, "That's the dude. Get him in jail."
That's the one. Yeah. That's the one. Well, of course, back then, that's before they had Miranda, so they could beat you into a confession. All right, rubber hoses. Ooh. And a lot of times that's how they would do it. They would, intimidate somebody to confess, and then later on they try and find the evidence. If they didn't have the evidence, then they'd let them go.
Right, and that's one of the things about this this case that is so interesting too. Is like, since there is no Miranda, and since all of this is basically like, somebody said that you look shifty, so we're going to basically take you in the back room for a little while until there's ironclad evidence. It's basically guilty until proven innocent in this case.
You either have to have an eyewitness, several eyewitnesses, or a confession. Okay. And as we'll see in Clementine Barnabet, she confessed, but they put her on trial anyway. And there was a reason for doing that. But in the Axeman case, if you look at, and I mentioned this to you before, David, about similarities with an earlier serial killer, the granddaddy. There was a message on the sidewalk.
Right. I was going to bring that up.
Yeah. Mrs. Maggio will stay up late tonight, just like Mrs. Tony. Well, these cryptic messages that come through, I mean, immediately we think about the Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing.
Not be blamed for nothing, yeah.
Was written allegedly by Jack the Ripper.
Allegedly.
In the Goulston Street. So, when we look at that, people are going, "Oh, wow." And in fact, there was a detective by the name of John D'Antonio, who was Italian, if you didn't guess by the name, and he said there are similarities between this case and the Jack the Ripper case.
Totally.
Okay. And as the case goes along, we start to see there are similarities. Was the guy read about Jack the Ripper? Did he know about him? Did he conduct his crimes in a similar fashion? Not necessarily using the same weapon,
right?
But did he conduct his crimes in the same fashion?
It's okay. So there's a lot of things that, like, if there's a Venn diagram, most of these circles overlap because you've got chalk graffiti, you've got letters to the news, you've got bold statements by possibly the murderer, possibly a crank. You've got a very short time period too, 18 months total, right?
Well, allegedly.
Allegedly, yeah.
Okay.
Same thing with Jack the Ripper. We've got, a year or less, allegedly, unless you want to open up all of history and anybody can be a murder victim.
Well, if you look at the year prior to the Ripper killings, you had Martha Tabram, okay, who had been stabbed repeatedly over 40 times, okay, wasn't ripped like some of the other victims.
Right.
And I believe it was Emma Smith, okay. These were two women that were before the canonical five.
Yeah.
And they're trying to lump them into, it's kind of like, you know what, this documentary I was watching, I was telling you about, they tried to say that those were like practice runs for him.
Right.
Before he actually did those. And then there was a couple after that, 1889, where they tried to say, oh, this one was Francis Coles, I think was one of them.
Yeah.
And then they had a torso.
Yeah, the torso killings. Like there were wasn't there like 2 or 3 torsos? There was like a torso in the Thames, and they found a torso here or there. They go, oh, it's probably Jack the Ripper. And
they were always finding torsos.
Oh yeah,
they were always finding them. Just where they are. So
yeah, it was. I don't know. With Jack the Ripper and the Axeman paralleling here too. We've got the Axeman's canonical. Was it 6 or 8? 5?
Canonical 5. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so they have that in common too, right? They both have canonically 5 victims.
Yeah, but there were several. Jack the Ripper never let anybody live.
Right.
The Axeman did. So not let them live, but he was probably discovered. And but then you have that red herring with the Bessemer case and Sarah Lowe.
So let's back up a little bit and touch on the Bessemer case. So that happened June 27th, 1918. Louis Bessemer and Harriet Lowe, his mistress.
She was his girlfriend. Girlfriend.
Yeah.
And what happened was a guy by the name of John Zanka was a baker, and he was delivering bread to
that
Bessemer
poor guy.
because Bessemer had a bakery. So he was delivering the bread, and he went back there, and he went to the side door. In New Orleans, a lot of these houses that are uptown, they have a front door, and then they have a side entrance. Okay. Sometimes there's an alleyway. Sometimes there's not. You go in, and that's where the grocery store would be. Well, Zanka goes back there, and Bessemer answers the door. It's about 5 o'clock in the morning. He's got blood coming down here, and the Axeman got me, or something like that. And come to find out, Bessemer was allegedly, not the FBI, but the feds got involved because, they found out he had been writing letters back to where he had come from in Yiddish and German.
Right. And that was like the craziest part about this is when they were like, oh, and guess what? He's also a German spy. And I was like, what? And that's before World War II, because you think World War II, German spies.
Well, World War One.
World War One, we got a German spy. Which
yes, we were at war with Germany after April 6th of 1917.
Yeah.
And he, well, anyway, so Sarah Lowe had been attacked so badly that they didn't think she was going to survive. But she didn't. And Bessemer was placed on trial, and he actually went to prison for her murder. But I think it was a fight that got out of hand, and he used the Axeman as an excuse.
Yeah.
To cover up what was good, because she must have been like getting ready to rat him out or something, and he decided, nope, can't do that.
Yeah, that one is so crazy, and it happens. Whatever, we can blah 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 blah. The red herring happened. It's the second murder attributed to the Axeman. And it's so because like you would think, all right, if you're gonna if you're gonna be a copycat, right? Or, I guess that's an interesting point. If there was not the public zeitgeist of serial killers, maybe one is enough to be like, oh no, the same guy who did the other one did this one too. I feel like today you'd wait for at least 3.
Yeah, but you got to remember too, David, is the first one, the first murder was brutal. I mean, the Maggios was brutal.
Rough.
Now, come to find out, there were murders just like the Axeman that took place 6-7 years before that.
Yeah, it was like around 10, 11?
1910
Yeah.
was one of the first ones. I believe it was the Crudies and Davy, Joseph Davy and his wife. And to attribute these murders to the mafia is absolutely ridiculous. If you know anything about mafia rules, they don't kill women and they don't kill children.
Yeah.
And there was a child that was attacked near the last one, the Court of Miglia child was attacked. And there was a story involved with that one because I had interviewed the great nephew of the only two people that were ever tried for the Axeman murders, the Giordanos. Right. And they he kind of let me in on what was going on. Of course, then again, if you are Italian or Sicilian, family business is not discussed outside the family. Okay. And that goes with the whole community in most instances. But there was the Rosettos, the Davis, and the Crudies were all three Italian families, and the Andolinis. Now, the Andolinis took place in 1917. We're talking about 1911, 1910, 1911, respectively, for Rosetto and Davi and Crudi. And these were all Axeman-type murders that took place.
Right.
The Andolinis were 1917, where the two teenage boys were attacked. One left a hole in one of the kids' heads. Actually, he survived. But 1918, for some reason, is, when they talk about the Maggios as the first victim, every time I watch a show where they talk about the Axeman, they always mention the Maggios first. I'm going, whoa, wait a minute. They had these murders that took place before that had the same signature. Okay. But they were kind of isolated a little bit. So they didn't put them together right away.
Well, so there was also one where, and this happens in modern day too, if you're a fan of true crime, you've seen this, maybe it's even a cliche of true crime, but at some point he goes to like a different town in Louisiana. Oh God, was it when he killed, or when he attacked Anna Schneider, or was it Joseph Romano that was in the other town outside of New Orleans?
Gretna?
So
Gretna,
what?
Louisiana?
Yeah, maybe.
Gretna was the Court of Miglias.
Okay, so which was the one? Gosh, I'm so bad at this. So it was, so the Maggios, the Bessemer red herring. Then we have the Anna Schneider. So to quickly go over that one,
That was I believe that was August. Was that August 5th?
Yeah, August 5th.
Yeah, 1918.
And what a oh my God! If you would scumbag, like murders are automatically scumbags. However, when Axeman dude runs into Anna Schneider's house, she's 9 months pregnant, has 3 little kids, and he just goes to town on her face.
She lost her left eye, but she had her baby. Her baby survived. I think it didn't have anything to do with conscience. I think somebody heard something. Yeah, is what happened. And but to attack a pregnant woman like that, in that brutal fashion, maybe he was trying to establish his level of brutality, or the level that he would actually go to. Maybe. So,
and okay, so here's another question that maybe you'll have some opinions on. So most people who are in this genre know, or at least are semi-familiar with all the letters that Jack the Ripper supposedly wrote, and maybe 1 or 2 are actually legit. In your professional opinion, when the Axeman writes his letter to the New Orleans Times-Picayune, is that the dude? Probably not, in my mind.
No, because it was. If you look at some of the, like for instance, when you look at the Dear Boss letter that Jack the Ripper wrote, it's too clean. It's too. It's just sanitized. Right. But when you look at the Mr. Lusk letter,
that one's legitimate, I think.
Letter, that was the killer, because of the simple fact that, he's talking about, one kidney I took from one woman, t'other piece I fried and ate. It was very nice. If you wait a while longer, I'll send you the bloody knife that did it. He's talking about the crime.
Yeah.
But the letter that the Axeman wrote does not discuss any of the crimes
Not a thing.
whatsoever. How do you determine whether this is the guy or not? It's not.
Totally.
It was probably somebody that was playing a prank. You see, he's already injected himself into the investigation anyway. All right. But I don't believe that letter was, he's writing a letter. I think he was a lunatic.
Totally.
Saying that he was from hell and Tartarus and he was best friends with the angel of death. Who the hell says that?
Yeah.
There's
artistry to it. Whoever that lunatic was had a sense of panache, let's say. Because he does drop stuff like he's from Tartarus, which is, especially even now, that's a rough reference for people. But like before the internet, what's Tartarus? I don't know. But his whole, and I wish I had pulled up a copy. It's a long letter, but I think it was like the most macabre practical joke ever. Because in his letter, obviously, you know this. If you watch the video, you know this. But he's like, you know what? He's not an uncaring demon. He says, I love jazz. He says, anybody who's playing jazz, right, on, oh God, do you remember the date?
It was in March of 1919.
So close after one of the murders, he goes, hey, everybody playing jazz, I'll float over them like the angel of death, which is, I thought, a great biblical reference, because instead of putting lamb's blood over the sill of your door to keep your firstborn alive, you just had to put on some, Charles Mingus or whatever.
It was actually March 16th, 1919,
the
next day was St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, man.
So, he's saying, at 12 o'clock earthly time on next Tuesday night, I'm going to pass over New Orleans. In my infinite mercy, I'm going to make a proposition to people. I'll play jazz. I'll pass over your house.
So great.
He's very fond of it. Well, is it because he didn't think people were playing enough jazz? Because now remember, no radios at the time. Radios didn't actually come into households until about the mid-1920s, if you could afford one.
Yeah.
And, everybody had a piano. People played music at the houses, or they'd go to the jazz clubs. So, I don't think it was him.
No.
It's an interesting twist and an interesting turn to that story. Also, the people of New Orleans kind of exhibited their sense of humor with this, because we used to have a supermarket chain down here called Piggly Wiggly.
Oh, yeah.
And there was an ad in the paper after, I think it was the third murder, that said, the Axeman is at the Piggly Wiggly and he's slashing prices.
Right.
Ugh.
Wow.
Ugh.
There are, okay.
That's just,
So
that's sick.
Vintage crime like this is kind of akin to the 80s child media. So in the 80s, you could make a cartoon that could have death and violence and shit like that and really scar a child. But way long time ago in the teens, you could do shit like that. And not for nothing, the Axeman was so popular that after this, Joseph John Davila wrote...
Actually, it was before the night.
Oh, before the night.
Yeah, he wrote the Papa Don't Scare Me, or the
Mysterious Axeman's Jazz.
Yeah, which is a crappy song. It's a crappy song. It was a quickie song put together. But they actually have, in the Historic New Orleans collection downtown, they have an original copy of that music. And when people ask about it, then they go into the Axeman story. Not a lot of you might say artifacts are left over from the case, but some of the houses are still there, and they haven't changed that much. So I'm sorry I interrupted you there, David.
Oh no, don't worry about it. But that's part of all of this too, is like, I think that if this had happened anywhere else, maybe it wouldn't be as interesting, because I think because New Orleans, let's be real, has a macabre feel atmospherically in pop culture. New Orleans is it's a wild place. And so the fact that we've got, the Axemen came and slashed prices, we've got jazz dedicated to a murder, we've got all of these crazy things happening. I don't think, let's say this takes place in Oh God, where's Klinger from? Somewhere in Ohio, right?
Ottumwa, Iowa.
Yeah, let's say you go to Ottumwa, Iowa.
Oh, no. Toledo, Ohio.
Toledo, yeah, he's from
That's where
Toledo.
Klinger's from, yeah.
The Toledo Mud Hens.
Yeah.
So let's say that happens there. No jazz is happening there. No funny supermarket ads. It would just be a depressing, grim march through this 18 months of murder.
Well, look at Cleveland in the 1930s with the there was the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run.
Right.
There was nothing really there's no sense of humor about that.
No.
There was it was a serial killer that drained the bodies of blood and disemboweled them. And, there was, but in New Orleans, it is a different place. It really is a different place. And it's because of the mystique, the supernatural mystique, I think a lot of the times that keeps people, that must be evil spirits or something like that doing that. Whereas law enforcement's going, I wish these people would wake up. We got a murderer on the loose, and we're trying to find him. But like I said, I think the letter was not written by the killer.
But
a lot
well
of people
written,
have tried to say that. Well, this was the killer that went to the Midwest. Well, how can you say that? It's different. Again, we talk about axes are weapons of opportunity. I don't think the Axeman carried an axe in a case like they said on American Horror Story, going around killing people. I think it was, he was a maniac. He was a madman.
So, like, you refresh my memory, because one of the murders attributed to the Axeman, or one of the multiple murders, was done with a bar instead of an axe.
That was the last one, Mike Pepitone.
Yeah, Pepitone.
It was an iron bar with a nut on the end of it.
Yeah.
And the only reason why they classified it as an Axeman murder is because Esther Pepitone, the wife, said the Axeman got Mike.
Right.
Okay. Now, Mike Pepitone was a member of the mafia. All right. His father had killed some maid guy, and the father wound up in prison, and somebody must have been they alleged that somebody was taking revenge against the son. That's why they killed Mike Pepitone. But it totally goes far off the signature of the Axeman. Again, how do you hide one murder? The reason for one murder, you hide it in a series of other ones. Okay, so maybe was Mike Pepitone the target to begin with? All right, or was it just some psychopath having a good time?
So what do you personally think the Italian-American connection is? Because there is a through line here. Do you think it is mafia related? Is it sort of Italian hysteria of the time? What, like, personally, in your heart of hearts, what do you think it is?
Well, why would he attack Mrs. Schneider?
Right.
And why would he attack? There was another Jewish girl that was attacked. Okay. If the neighborhoods back then were so close and so tight, everybody knew each other.
Right. So, yeah. If you just pick a neighborhood, you're because Schneider. Okay. Was Schneider the one that was outside of New Orleans?
No, Cortimiglia.
Cortimiglia. Okay. Yeah, so I was like, okay, maybe that's
Jefferson Parish, where I live.
There you go.
Okay. Now, there's two parts of Jefferson Parish. There's the East Bank and there's the West Bank. I live on the East Bank. This happened on the West Bank.
Yeah.
Okay. My father was originally from Gretna, Louisiana. And he's the one that told me about this, when I was a young kid, scared the crap out of me. It was Cortimiglia. Now, the Cortimiglia, that was strange because I interviewed a descendant of the Giordano's, who were the only people brought to trial for the Axeman killings. It seems that from what he told me, the Cortimiglias and the Giordano's were having a territorial spat argument. Cortimiglia had been fronted by the local mob, and the Giordano's were not buying goods from the Cortimiglias. They were buying them from somebody else, and the mob tried to make them do that. Well, it just seems a little weird or bizarre that you sacrifice your only child in order to prove a point about business. Because if you remember, the daughter was killed. Okay, the daughter was killed, and the Mrs. Cortimiglia and her husband survived. Now, come to find out, later on, Mrs. Cortimiglia stated that the saints came to her and said, you're wrong for doing this. You're wrong for bearing false witness against these men. And that's when they were let go and released, and that was the end of that.
Yeah. Okay. So for a little context for everybody, because I feel like we're moving a little quick. So for the Cortimiglia attack, how old was the dad? He was like in his 70s, right?
The Cortimiglia attack, I think he was in his early 60s.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken. He was quite a bit older than his wife.
Yeah, he was older than middle age, but Orlando and his son, Frank, who was only 17 at the time, basically
17 years old, yeah.
got fingered by Mrs. Cortimiglia, and they were like, what? And what's crazy about this, too, is it went all the way to them being both convicted, one sentence to life, one sentence to death.
The 17-year-old was sentenced to death.
To death.
Yes.
And then Mrs. Cortimiglia is like, oh, whoopsie. She's like, I'm going to go do a whammy on that one. She's like, my bad. And I was like, what?
Well, and I read, and this is like, I don't know, I read a whole big article about this in some place, and that was the first one that I read about. Like the beginning of this whole report, this was the first one. And like, I read that they, people were trying to get her to not say that they didn't do it.
It's a crazy time because like this is like right in the I don't want to call it a sweet spot, but it is. It's a sweet spot for like public justice and like public lynchings and shit.
Mm-hmm.
And well, specifically in Louisiana. Now, what you got to remember is let me digress a little bit here.
Mm-hmm.
In 1890, we had a police chief by the name of David C. Hennessy who was assassinated.
Okay.
And I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but what happened was he was assassinated and the mafia was blamed for it. And because he was killed with the typical shotgun, eight gauge shotgun that the mafia used back then. And he was hailed as a crime-fighting hero. Well, I'm here to tell you David Hennessy was the worst crooked cop in the history of New Orleans. But he died for a specific purpose. And that purpose was there was a faction of the founding fathers of the city that wanted to control the docks of New Orleans. And the Italians controlled the docks. And Hennessy was assassinated in October of 1890. They arrested 19 Italians, and a couple of them were considered mafiosi. In fact, we did let me plug the show again. We did an episode on the first Mafia Don, a gentleman by the name of Joseph Makeka.
Right.
And I interviewed a local mafia historian, Sal Perricone, who's also a really good friend of mine. David, you could probably sit there and talk to him for hours about the mafia. But so what happens is these Italians are put on trial and they're acquitted. Right. And the next day, they're brought to the old parish prison. The next day, an article appears in the paper of a mass meeting. This was March 14th, 1891, saying that we're going to remedy justice and we're going to right what, avenge Hennessy's killing. Well, they wind up going to the prison. This big old crowd winds up being about 10,000 people, pitchforks and rifles and all kinds. It looked like a Frankenstein movie. And they go in and the prison guards let them in. They grab 11 of the Italians and they kill them and they lynch them.
It was so.
And they use them for target practice. Okay. There was a movie that Christopher Walken was in called Vendetta. It was on HBO in 1992. Okay. And it was about that. So this is the beginning of what I call the catalyst of violence against Italians. So a lot of times Italians, they wanted to keep a low key because they weren't sure what was going to happen. And the police chief at the time, Mooney, during the Axeman murders, oh no, this has nothing to do with the mafia. Because he didn't want Italians getting lynched.
Right.
It's extra legal justice. It's
Totally.
extra-legal justice.
Oh my God. Like the amount of vintage crime that, if not ends in public lynching, is that like tangentially, like someone was lynched who wasn't actually guilty, is like crazy off the charts. But that does bring me back to, so it was like, it was a 4 killings. So we got the Maggios, the Bessemers, Schneider, and Joseph Romano, who was attacked on August 10th. Now, was it Mooney? He was the superintendent who said he was on the order of Jack the Ripper, right? Or am I confusing the guy?
Well, actually, it was D'Antonio.
Okay, D'Antonio.
He kind of made the assessment. And it was actually one of the first times where he was trying to do a criminal profile.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you remember to the Jack the Ripper case, Dr. Thomas Bond, who read all the autopsy reports, he basically did a criminal profile of who Jack the Ripper may have been back during that time. Well, D'Antonio was an experienced criminologist. I mean, he knew the Italians. He had been involved. He's Italian. Right. And Mooney went to him and said, "What do you think of this?" And there was an article that appeared. There was a long gap in between attacks at one time. And there was an article appeared that they interviewed D'Antonio, the Daily Picayune interviewed him, and he said that the Axeman is a Jekyll Hyde type of personality.
Right. Yeah.
Well, if that doesn't delve into the psychology of what a criminal profile is, nothing. It would be nothing. Okay, so I think D'Antonio knew. Mooney happened to be a railroad commissioner before he was made police superintendent. Really? So he was a political appointee rather than a merit type of appointee. So Mooney actually, on the Bessemer case, if we go back to the Bessemer case, there were 2 detectives that were investigating the Bessemer case as if it were an Axeman-related murder. And then come to find out, it was just, again, the red herring. Those 2 detectives got demoted back to patrolmen because Mooney said, "You guys made a complete ass out of yourselves," and so that's what happened with them. But D'Antonio, I think, controlled more, steered more toward the logical than Mooney. Okay. Police work back then was not, a Sherlock Holmes type thing. It was your typical grunt, police officer banging the pavement, doing interviews. Again, no forensics whatsoever.
Yeah, it feels like old-timey and vintage and even like really old crimes like from the 16 and 1700s, if you want to get into those criminal cases. It just feels like the work put in is like, well, we asked around, most people felt this way, so we killed that guy. What? That is so like it's crazy. And up until like the 20s, 30s, 40s, we've got people who are like basically well, a lot of people think it was this dude. We threw him in jail, we punched him up a little bit. He said he didn't do it, but we electrocuted him and whoops.
We made a mistake.
Yeah.
And then we're going to apologize 30 years later. Okay. In the United States, we see a lot of this happening. Well, let me go back a little bit. 1911 was the first time that fingerprints were used in a court case. So here we have 1918. But they don't have people going around with little brushes and powder,
right,
looking for the fingerprints.
No.
Okay. And it could have, if they had, I wish I had my that camera.
Time traveling camera. But you'd have to be there to take the picture.
Yeah, take a picture there, or go back to one of those nights to figure out who it is. Man, then we'd know who Jack the Ripper was, But then, like you said, it would take all the mystery out of it, and then we'd know who the Axeman was.
Yeah, you'd kill it.
Oh yeah, but there've been so many theories about who he was and why he stopped killing. And I think the reason why he stopped killing was he knew he wasn't going to get away with it much longer, because you had people staying up late at night with shotguns in their laps.
Right.
Businesses were not open as much. It was kind of like a lockdown, and but people were more vigilant then. And a couple of people were actually getting shot. They weren't killed because people thought they were and that's another thing. You have a panicked citizenry.
Yeah.
that's going to shoot first and ask questions later. You see? So
let me tie it into, we've talked about Jack the Ripper a little bit and all of its all the corollaries there. And it wasn't until after the attack of Joseph Romano. So now, when did the term serial killer, because like according to my research, which was mostly your video, the serial killer quote unquote MO was not established until the attack on Joseph Romano. And I'm wondering how close in time all of this was, because I can't pull it off the top of my head, to the Valiska Axe murders.
The Valiska Axe murders were in June of 1912.
So pretty close.
Pretty close. I'm not quite
From the
sure that it's the same person.
Yeah,
okay?
I don't think it is.
I don't
personally
think it is. I mean, you know, but all these killings. In fact, I have the book. I'm going to read it one day about the man from the train. I think it was where he kind of sets off on using a geographical profile to prove that one person did it. The Valiska murders, and there was others that were committed in the Midwest around that time.
Right.
The one thing that that comes to mind when I think about, you know, we have the Valiska murders and those other murders that happened in the Midwest, but then we had Clementine Barnabet was in that time period, 1911 and 1912. So was she responsible for the ones in Valiska also? I don't think so. You know, I love it when people try to tag it to one person and put it to rest, but it doesn't, you know, logic doesn't let it happen that way.
You know, for the layman, right? If you're new to this, or if you're sort of, you know, sort of laissez-faire about it, when you see a bunch of axe murdering happen around the same time and around the same part of the country, you go, oh my God, they're all connected. But think of it this way. Everybody, almost bar none, at this time period had an axe, a pile of wood, and a wood-burning stove. And any crazy person could walk up, take that axe, knock on the door, and start hacking away.
Oh yeah, I mean, but look at also now. Let's go across the pond a little bit. Okay, 1922, Hinterkaifeck.
Okay.
The Hinterkaifeck murders. I don't know if you've ever heard of those. There was a whole family wiped out. It looked like it was a farming utensil. It had a spike on the end of it.
Yeah.
Okay. And they actually decapitated the coroner, the medical examiner, actually decapitated the bodies to study the heads, and then lost them. All right. And in 2014 or 2015, there was a reinvestigation of the case. The farmhouse no longer exists in Hinterkaifeck, and so many theories about that. But then people who were looking at Valiska said, well, it's, you know what, Hinterkaifeck, that's got to be the same guy that did Valiska. And there was one video I saw on YouTube where 79 years of axe murders they pin on one guy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember that, because like you were talking about the suspect who would be pinned for all these murders would be at like youngest 70 something, and at oldest he'd be like 110 or something.
Yeah,
ridiculous.
And you're looking at a guy. And number one, he couldn't even pick up an axe.
Totally.
He's got a problem peeing, for God's sake.
Yeah.
He's not going to pick up an axe and kill somebody. But it's nice to sit there and think about, okay, well, you know, can we connect this one to that one? It's nice because then case closed.
Right.
Okay, you'll be a hero. Okay. Well, some things aren't meant to know the solution. We're not meant to know the solution of some things.
No.
And on, you know, true crime, A Man's Dark Imagination, we don't solve cases. It's above our pay grade. Okay. It's just to document historical cases like that. And some, you know, some of them are more recent, but as far as the Axeman is concerned, I think when we talk about the last killing, let's talk about the last killing, if we could. Mike Pepitone.
Right.
You know, again, some people think it was a mafia thing because he was involved in the mafia heavily. Well, they end in 1919, October. I think it was October of 1919. Was the last known Axeman killing here. And then a couple of years later, there's an incident in Los Angeles where a woman shoots a guy, I think it was 12 times. She unloaded 2 revolvers in him.
Oh.
And then come to find out, it's Esther Albano,
Right.
who was Pepitone's wife.
Yeah, didn't she do that in California?
Yeah, she moved out to L.A.
Crazy.
and married a guy named Angelo Albano. And Albano wound up missing. Well, allegedly, a guy came to her and said, look, if you want to see your husband again and you want your kids to live, give me $500. And she pulled out 2 revolvers and just unloaded both of them into him. Well, this guy that she killed was a guy named M.G. Leone. But throughout history, people have named him as a guy named Joseph Montfrey.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Okay. And historians have said, oh, that was the Axeman. He was the Axeman. He did it.
There's a fair amount of content on YouTube right now that are proclaiming him the murderer, a la Walter Sickert as Jack the Ripper.
Brilliant.
I don't swallow either of those.
No. And for 90 years they said that. Well, I proved in my book that Joseph Montfrey had been in prison since 1908 to 1923.
Yeah.
Escaping once in 1960. So as far as Joseph Montfrey being the Axeman,
No.
no.
The Axeman is the perfect, maybe not even perfect, but way overblown idea of.
Oh, she was acquitted of that murder, by the way.
Oh, nice.
She was acquitted. Yeah.
But the Axeman is like if you were to say, take this concept up to 11, right? Where you go, okay, the Axeman, we'll look for every murderer with an axe and we'll blame it on him. That would be like if in current day, someone on the street, like let's say here in Arizona, on the streets of Phoenix, someone is shot with a 22 and they find a man who owns a 22 pistol and they go, oh, good. Everybody who's ever been killed by a 22 is this asshole.
Oh, yeah.
It's like that classic Simpsons episode where they, like, I can't remember the baseball player, but let's say Wade Boggs. They blame every murder in New York on like Wade Boggs or Ken Griffey Jr. And they go, I think we can close the book on everything ever. And like, what?
Oh, yeah. And what it is, it's just everybody likes everything tied up in a neat little bow.
Ain't gonna happen.
You know, there's no mystery to it. I mean, if there was no mystery to it, you and I would be sitting here talking about
Totally.
it. You know, neither one of us would have a channel.
Which is crazy because
yeah.
it also grows exponentially. Because like if you're into this, you'll probably know this stat that if a murder or crime is not, if no leads or if it's not solved within the first 48, it drops like 80%.
Yes.
So let's say, here we go, Jack the Ripper. It's 1898 or whatever, like whatever time period you want to start the first canonical or non-canonical victim. And now we are 750,000 hours beyond that. And our suspect pool is now in the triple digits. Mm-hmm. What are we doing here? Having fun, obviously. But,
well, having fun, but you're also speculating that someone you don't like in history could be Jack the Ripper. I mean, I've heard Aleister Crowley brought up as Jack the Ripper, which is not an implausible idea because the man was a total demon.
Oh, he was a weirdo,
all right,
for sure.
So, but yeah, you've got all these. Again, I don't think it's ever going to be solved.
No.
I really don't. I mean, I don't think what I think Patricia Cornwall did was absolutely asinine.
No, that was a total.
Okay.
If you read Patricia Cornwall's book, Portrait of a Killer, which I did probably 20 years ago now, you'll go, oh, whoa, until you find like impartial sources that go, well, yeah, that science didn't actually happen. And they go, what the fuck? But here's the thing. When it comes down to this, you've got character after character after character, and history is written by the winners. So if public consciousness turns against a certain principle, that will leak into true crime. Someone will get a bright idea of like, oh, you know what? Now that this is a hot topic, I'm going to find someone in 1880 who was that.
Well, I've heard the finger pointed at Rasputin. Yeah. As being Jack the Ripper.
Like,
you know,
for all the famous ones, we've got like William Gull, the Queen's surgeon. We've got Prince Albert, who may or may not have gotten chlamydia or gonorrhea or something, and yada, yada, yada.
He walked funny.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you've got Tumblety, you've got Kosminski. There are sicker...
James K. Stephan. You've got Prince Albert Victor Christian Edward. Yeah. You have Rosalind Donston. You have...
Jill the Ripper. Yeah.
James Kelly. You have George Chapman. All of these guys. I mean, it just goes nuts. It goes nuts because people want their candidate to be the guy.
And what's sad is, like, some of these people who were suspected contextually, not 120 goddamn years after the fact, like, their lives were absolutely ruined. Who was the guy who threw himself in the river? Was that Tumblety? He killed himself?
That was Montague.
Montague. Okay. John Philip Montague. John.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Montague killed himself because of all this shit. And it's like, again, we're before the times of like things like Miranda rights or innocent until proven guilty. And so basically, it's almost like you're living in a medieval village and the wise woman sticks her hand out of her hut and points at you and goes, witch! And everybody goes, well, yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
The wise woman said it. Let's kill this mother. What?
She's a witch.
So
she turned me into a newt. Yeah.
Yeah, I got better.
before you guys move on to something else, I want to acknowledge the typing square only because I haven't.
Sure.
I haven't had the chance. So Matt Willis is here. Baked
What up?
Salmon's here.
Hey, we got a lot of people here.
We've got Kayla here. We've got Scott Vaughn here. JW Wonderland 1981 is here. Sorry I didn't read all your comments out loud. They wouldn't have made sense with how fast the conversation's
we're moving
going.
very quickly.
Sorry about that.
Don't worry about it.
But just tell them that, okay?
Our audience knows how this show goes.
Yeah.
I like to run at the mouth occasionally, and so it's hard to get a word in edgewise.
Baked Salmon did say your stream is so good and great guest.
Bing. Yeah, we got a lot of love for you, Alan.
Yeah.
And obviously, because like it's a, I mean, not to tangentialize off of the crazy shit we're talking about now, but there are so few people. And here's the thing: it'll put it in such stark contrast because there are some content creators out there that I respect because I feel like they project an air of like research and credibility. But back to back with your video where you're showing the pictures and news clippings and like a picture of like the Axeman's jazz, I go, well, I guess the other people didn't know what the fuck they were talking about. And it's sometimes small, like in one I saw where Schneider, they said she was 8 months pregnant. And I was like, well, what? No, she was 9 months pregnant because she gave birth like bam right afterwards.
Yeah. Actually, I think the attack actually forced her into the labor.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't. Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, you get hit in the face with an axe a few times, you're going to let go of whatever
It's
you got hold of.
That's it, man.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be real. But yeah, like, that's why I loved and still love the Axeman case because it's a nice sort of Jack the Ripper on the bayou. Like it's all the intrigue, all the mystery, tons of suspects, but you also got some jambalaya and some crawdaddies in that.
I had that for dinner tonight, by the way.
Bingo.
One thing I want to mention is right after Katrina, we had 3 college girls who came up missing. And they were later found in their cars. Of course, they were deceased in bodies of water. Never caught the guy. And I was interested to find out if any other crimes like that had occurred throughout the South so that there could be some sort of geographical mapping of what was going on, because they never found out who did it. And it was an interesting case. I mean, a friend of mine called me, "Oh, did you hear what happened?" You know, they had video of this girl. She had left a bar. Next thing you know, they found her in her car underwater in Bayou St. John. Another one was found out by Irish Bayou. Another one in Lake Pontchartrain. And if you study true crime, you start to recognize the patterns.
Totally.
You know, you don't need 3.
No.
You don't need 3. you start to recognize the patterns.
And
so yeah,
what's wild about all of this too is like it happened a lot back in the old days. All you'd have to do is just step outside the municipality and detectives from other houses wouldn't talk. That shit exists to this day. There are so many possibly connected murders, but since they're in different principalities and municipalities and counties and stuff, they go, well, I don't know.
Well, that's what happened with I'm trying to remember his name. He was a strangler. He was a homosexual strangler down here. I can picture his face. His first name was Roland.
Oh God, yeah.
He killed 23 men. He killed 23 men in different parishes. And the problem was that they didn't talk to each other.
Yep.
So they couldn't figure out, oh, there must be a pattern here. This must be the same. And then they found him finally. And he actually was very remorseful when they caught him. Of course, they caught him and then he was remorseful.
Right,
but,
right.
You know, so.
There are so many like that where, and you know, here's the thing. Some things, some concepts, some principles, whatever you want to call them, in true crime and in murder and everything, they still hold up. Because we look back and you say, well, back in the old days, before accountability and yada, 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 there was a lot of disposable population because, you know, there was no such thing as a computer to keep track of everything. And there was no, no one thought to even give a shit. And even now, like if you're a truck driver, if you're a prostitute, if you're homeless, you are still, and several other genres of people,
disposable human beings.
Completely. Especially if you're of color, then by all means, see yourself to the pearly gates because no one's going to give a fuck, which is sad. Like
we had a serial killer in New Orleans from 1992 to about 1998, and he was murdering young black girls and young black men who were, for lack of a better term, drag queens. And they suspected it was a cop.
Really?
Yes. His name was Victor Gant.
Oh.
He's now a sergeant on a college campus in Georgia because he got drummed off the force. Come to find out, one of the women they found dead, she filed a complaint against him for excessive force. But after that complaint was filed, they moved in together.
Duh.
And and he also knew another one. Now they worked as prostitutes, you know, very, very sad lives, you know, kind of like the ones that Jack the Ripper preyed upon.
Yeah.
But there's a reason for that, is because they're not going to be that missed.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is like as long as we have these pockets of society that go by and large unnoticed, even like unless you're a John looking for a night out, all of us are going to drive by, see all of these women and or men and or whoever standing by the side of the road and all their weird get-ups, and you whatever.
But if you're a killer looking for a victim,
it's like a playground.
They stick out to you.
Yeah.
You know,
we had, so like, what was it, 2008, 2012, somewhere there. I don't know the exact dates. In Arizona, we had 2 serial killers. We had the baseline serial killer and crap. Well, whatever. So the one I'm going to talk about is Mark Goudeau. So Mark Goudeau was the baseline killer, and he would just walk up to ladies outside of places, and it gets weird because there's a sexual component without any sexual activity. So maybe he was unable to rise or whatever, but he would just run up to these women, do whatever he had planned to do, and then he would just go pop him in the head with a 22 and run away. And double digits all along Baseline Road. Do. And they go, well, I don't know. No one saw anything. No, because it was all people who were disposable.
Okay. They are disposable, and in their minds, in the killer's mind. The guy's name that I was talking about earlier, the homosexual strangler, was Roland Dominique.
Okay.
And he was suspected in over 20 crimes, but he was only convicted in 8. In Louisiana, we had 2 at one time. And one of them was a guy by the name of Derek Todd Lee.
Okay.
And Derek Todd Lee murdered 5 women. And what happened was the police accidentally threw themselves off the trail because they said the killer was white,
Uh-huh.
but Derek Todd Lee was black. And so they were looking for a white guy. And the other one was a guy by the name of Vincent. And the thing was, the police, in order to keep track as to how many they were killing, they actually had to examine the crime scene photos and the autopsy reports so that they know the cause of death, because these guys were killing so many women at one time.
Yeah.
And they finally caught both of them. Derek Todd Lee died of a heart attack 2 years ago in prison. He was 47 years
Nice.
old.
COVID has taken a lot of serial killers too, by the way. So one silver lining for COVID is it's killed like 3 or 4 serial killers personally that I know of.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, when you throw them on a ventilator and don't give them any medication, that's what happens.
Ah, good night,
they
sweet
save
prince.
the state a lot of money. But especially after in Louisiana after Katrina was a prime hunting ground for serial killers.
Anytime there's a
in Louisiana.
disaster, the scumbags come out of the woodwork. Like,
Oh yeah.
I think everybody probably is at least semi-familiar with the Blackout Ripper. So, like during World War II, they would shut out all the lights in England so they couldn't get bombed by the Germans, and that's when the dude would just run around and rip the shit out of people.
We did. I think we did an episode on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It was like anytime you see a natural disaster or anytime people have to go into hiding, that's when all the roaches come out and start gathering up their crumbs.
Oh yeah. How's Krista doing back there? She's just sitting there.
I'm good. I'm watching the
You okay?
chat and
Oh, okay.
One more I'll throw out too, because this reminded me of it. When you said they were looking for a white guy who was actually a black guy. So here, again, in Arizona, in Scottsdale, there was a guy named Dwight Jones. He killed a therapist. He killed 2 paralegals. He was basically going on a rampage because his wife broke up with him and he snapped. So I think he killed 3 or 4 people, and all of the news reports were like, well, he's a white guy in his mid-40s and he wears a baseball cap and yada, yada. Nothing like the dude. It was a bald black dude, short goatee, but the news photos showed, like, the artist rendition showed just some chubby old white guy who looked like the dude who molested Webster. What's his name?
Oh yeah. Well, if you look at statistically, there are very few black serial killers, but the ones that are
Mark Goudeau
are the worst. Okay. Who's this? Wayne Williams in Atlanta. He still claims he didn't do it. Well, guess what, pal? The evidence puts you at the scene. Okay?
I will never get over the whatever aspect or trait needed for when when the prosecution rolls up and they have triple digits of pieces of evidence and they go, Your Honor, not guilty. What?
well, look at
It's their final attempt to be heard.
Yeah, it's their last showing. Like it's their last
showing.
matinee, if you will.
Yeah. And when we look at I don't know, are we gonna have enough time to look at Clementine, or you want to do that another time?
We can crack into her right now if you want.
Okay. You were talking about these, these killers that, there's a mountain of evidence and they say not guilty. Well, they figure they're gonna have them prove it, even though there is evidence. In the Clementine Barnabet case, it's quite unique because the perpetrator was 17 years old.
Yeah.
And she exhibited mind control or some sort of cult influence.
There's like voodoo
over her
involved and
followers.
magic and all that.
Yeah. And it didn't just affect Louisiana. There were people murdered in Texas as well, San Antonio and Houston. But she had help. She had to have help. I mean, if we start going into the crimes that occurred, first one took place in February of 1911 in Lafayette, Louisiana. And a lot of people say, "Oh, I never heard of this." Hold on a second. I never heard of this. Well, when you're looking at a family this woman's name was Nina Martin. She was sitting at her kitchen table. She was looking at across the little way where she was, and we're talking about black families in this particular neighborhood, and noticed that there was nobody across the street. And she knew that these people would come out and in the mornings and things of that nature. So Alexander Andrus was the guy who lived over there with his family, and it was him and his wife and I believe his 2 children. And when Nina Martin sent somebody over there, the guy came back and couldn't explain. He couldn't describe what he saw.
Right.
And it was the family had been butchered.
Yeah.
And but then again, we were talking about victims before, where nobody would, they wouldn't be missed. Well, think about this. These are black families in the beginning of the 20th century, during Jim Crow.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, who wants to find their killer? Okay. So if but the thing is, if it's a run-of-the-mill murder, they probably would have just let it go.
Mm-hmm.
But they saw that the murders kept taking place. And then in March 22nd in 1911, there was the Louis Castaway, his wife, and their 3 children suffered the same injuries and there was also the Byers family, all of them slaughtered in their beds. This is not just one person.
No.
One person couldn't do this. You have to maintain control, because if you go after the kids first, the adults are going to go nuts. Okay. Right. So, wound up being about 48 people.
Which is crazy. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I cannot, there's a, if you want to bring terrible movies into this, the movie Cobra with Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah.
Like that, I feel like maybe they ripped this off because the murderers in that are a bunch of axe murderers. Mm-hmm. They run around banging axes together, and they're riding motorcycles and killing people with axes. And keep in mind, I feel like, because axes, I feel like get lumped into the same genre as crowbars in that they show up in video games a lot. So people think that you can throw them around and they're light as a feather. Not the case.
No. It requires a lot of energy, unless you're hyped up or you have a lot of adrenaline.
That's true.
If you're using them, murderers have a lot of adrenaline. Okay. And if you're going to use an axe, once you use a hatchet, it's easier to carry. It basically does the same damage if you swing it as hard.
Yeah.
And
but even then, you're going to make a lot of noise. You're going to make a lot of.
Oh yeah.
A lot of stuff is going to be going on.
If you've ever heard a blade hit bone, okay, or something that is related to bone, it is very loud. It's a loud crack. Okay. And a lot of times that's why. And I want to go back to Valiska for a minute. Most of the people that were killed at Valiska were not killed with the blade. They were killed with the blunt end.
Yeah, which sucks. Like if you're, let's say you flip a coin and you land on axe murder, it can still get worse, right? Mm-hmm. Worst way to die, axe. No, there's a worse way. They flip that baby around and it's not the sharp end. Because in I think the Clementine case, she gives testimony as to she came in, saw the wife in the bed, and she hit her on the temple, and boom, out like a light, right?
Oh yeah.
But if you're gonna be using the back end of that thing, no way in hell. It's 8, 10 whacks, and then you're just like. But then obviously the MO is well, they enjoyed it.
They enjoyed it, but if you look at Valiska as compared to Clementine. In the parents' bedroom, there were marks on the ceiling where the axe was hitting, okay, and was chipping off. And so, when you look at, again, different types of motives, what was Clementine's motive for causing these people to go and kill for her?
Religious weirdness? Yeah, that's the thing. It was just and sometimes it's just that easy. There are some people who... maybe you're familiar with this case or not, but the guy who made the Killdozer, who then shot himself, look it up if you haven't, but the guy made a giant indestructible bulldozer and basically vanquished all of his enemies, and then when he was out of options, he shot himself in the head.
Okay.
So So there are people like that who are straight and narrow until they snap, or as little as, and I'm going to bring this up too, because Clementine is akin to this woman, Magdalena Solis, who was the high priestess of blood, another cult figure who's just sort of fell into running a cult and got in love with murder.
It's a power thing, David. You know, people have power over life and death. You know, when we talk about Clementine, Barnabet, or even Solis, from what I understand, if you command that power over other people, it's quite an aphrodisiac. It's not necessarily a sexual aphrodisiac, but a power mad type thing.
It juices you up for sure.
Oh yeah. So if we look at Clementine, you know, I've had questions about when we talk about Clementine, was it a voodoo thing? You know, the circle of the five. When you look at all of this, I don't know if voodoo had anything to do with it. I think it was a misinterpretation of the scriptures. That's the only thing I can come up with. And most of the time, like the Branch Davidians, that was a misinterpretation of the scriptures.
Well, if we're going to be real about it, all of these things like voodoo, Santeria, yada, 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 it's basically all of the original mythology, religion, whatever you want to call it, sort of mashed in and tried to fit with Christianity. So you say, well, we still love Jesus and everything, but we really kept all of our weirdo cult stuff too. So it's not a far stretch to be like, well, you know, before Christians came, we had XYZ figure, and now we just changed their names to blah, 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 like the Romans did to the Greeks. But if you look at religion, and we did an episode on this too. It's called the Bloodsuckers, where people said the blood is the life. Yeah. Okay. Basically, what Clementine was saying, that you have to atone with whatever sin with blood. And I think it was people that were leaving her church that she thought had to atone for, and that's where the murders, that's how I feel the murders took place. Okay. But yeah, it's when you get this happens in everything, but like when something starts out and gains traction, it can go off the rails very quickly. And when you talk about stuff like the melting of religions or all these different cultures, especially in New Orleans or even the Deep South or anywhere where there's a lot of different immigrants coming together and throwing their stuff into the pot, it's easy to go like, well, I can justify anything I want because this culture says this culture says this, and you just sort of cherry pick, and then boom, you've got Clementine, who is a straight up axe murderer.
Oh yeah, and she was, if you remember, she was determined to be a woman who was not very she was a tramp. Right. Okay. And you know, did she lose power over, I mean, and she used to whip her lovers. Yeah. All right. So, you know, this is someone who was used to doling out pain. Now, whether she said it was a sacrifice of the church so that she could get away with it, that's something else to think about. I mean, because there was a psychiatric evaluation of her, and they determined her to be slightly nuts. Kind of. Slightly. But they put her on trial anyway. Okay. And she confessed. And if you remember, during her confession, she was giggling the whole time, and she was not remorseful or anything like that. You know, if I could continue with that, when she went on trial, I mean, you know, she said her father did it, and then her brother did it, and then they turn around and they testified against her. She confesses, but they put her on trial. And the reason why they did that was because they wanted her to get the death penalty. Okay. If she confessed and they gave her the death penalty anyway, nobody would have any confidence in the legal system. Right. Okay. So
and it was sketchy from the beginning too, because like when her father comes home and he doesn't get dinner, he lost his pipe, and then to wake up to your kids being like, "Oh yeah, he came home covered in blood and brain matter." What?
Oh, by the way, yeah, I just saw that. I just thought I'd mention that to you, and then then all of a sudden the circle turns around and it starts pointing at her. Okay. And at first people didn't believe it. Oh, come on. She's 17 years old. How can she have this kind of influence
So funny.
on people?
Back in the old days, if you were a kid or a woman, completely spotless.
Well, I think what really did her in was the ganja bags. Okay. When she went and bought these bags from a voodoo priest that would protect her against committing any crimes. And that was mentioned, then that kind of, pointed the finger at her. Well, why would you need these bags?
Right.
If you weren't the murderer, why would you need these bags? She gets convicted after a trial. Oh God, something about this is because it persists to this day, because there are true crime cases that still involve voodoo and voodoo dolls and yada yada yada. But here's how it always shakes out. These people turn to the dark arts. They turn to pick your deity of choice, whatever. And they find God in prison.
Yeah. But before that, they're burning incense and cutting the throats of chickens, and they realize that magic doesn't actually work. So they have to do the dirty work themselves. And it only serves to the one I'm speaking of. There was a Chinese-American medical student who was killed by your best friend. Because she hated her, and this best friend was absolutely batshit insane. But come to find out, it was the reason she killed her is because she was at the end of her miserable rope, because she had altars with incense and blood and feathers and all the black magic you could think of and conjure. But it doesn't work, so she had to go and get her in the car and hit her on the head with a pipe.
Jeez.
Well, it didn't work a lot. Well, if you follow those types of rituals, it didn't work because there wasn't a ritual involved. Yeah. If you just kill somebody with a pipe, there's no ritual. What's that, a plumber's ritual?
That's the thing. We as humans, some of us like to delve into and think that magic or spiritual evil or whatever, witchcraft is real. And then, it kind of shakes out that that's all bullshit and you got to do the dirty work yourself. And here's the thing about true crime. I realize that true crime exists because people are stupid. And we get to point these things out. But if I were in their shoes, the day after I killed someone, I would clean up the chicken blood, right? I would clean up the incense. I would remove the altar with the picture of them with all the darts in their face. But I'll be damned if they never do.
No, they never do. They it's like they want to be caught.
I feel like if you keep in touch with true crime, especially contemporary right now true crime, I feel like you almost have to want to be caught, because there's no way not to track you now.
That's true.
Yeah.
And I feel like the people that keep trophies want to be caught.
Like it'd be so like the Valiska, the Axeman, they could have kept 1,000,000 trophies and no one would know, because there was no cell phone, there was no GPS, there was no registry, there was no yada, yada, yada. Now, if you want to commit a crime, to just do it without thinking is, because you could get away with that back in the day. The Axeman, I don't know how much time and effort he put into each attack. Probably not a lot, given the facts and the circumstances that the axe was used and he had to run off a lot of the time. But you could get away with that shit because you couldn't be like, well, evidence that didn't exist.
Right.
Well, Krista was talking about the souvenirs. Okay. Look at our friend Jack.
Right.
What he took. Okay. I look at it like, okay, if I'm going to take a souvenir, it's not going to be something from the body. Mm-hmm. It's going to be, let's be a little bit, a pair of panties or a bra or
something easy, right?
Something easy, not something that I've got to take my scalpel and open up and take it out and put it in a jar somewhere.
So, let me run this theory up your flagpole then, because in several Jack the Ripper books and resources that I've found, several of them are leaning towards they found the bodies, yada, yada, yada. They were transported to the morgue and maybe an assistant took the organs because, again, this is not Leopold and Lowe. Who are the body stealers?
Burke and Hare.
Burke and Hare, yeah. this is around the time of Burke and Hare. So when the actual mortician who didn't want to wake up in the middle of the night shows up the next morning, all the organs are gone. That could just be a couple of coins in his assistant's pocket and some doctor in a college somewhere being like, here's a kidney, everybody.
I would agree with that, with the exception that after Burke and Hare were convicted and hanged, the law has changed about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was kind of, but it's interesting that you brought that up because there's a historian by the name of My Trow, is his name, who said that there was a morgue attendant who was more than likely exhibited traits of being Jack the Ripper.
Mm-hmm.
That was also on YouTube somewhere, but it was a pretty interesting program. The thing about true crime, one of your administrators, your moderators, said that she didn't know enough about true crime to ask questions. The whole thing is that, and I explained this before, that the dark part of your mind always holds the interest.
Mm-hmm.
It always holds the interest. And if you find, like for instance, I'm not interested. Well, it's not that I'm not interested. It's just that other cases hold more fascination for me than some.
Right.
Okay.
Totally understand.
If you look at H.H. Holmes, H.H. Holmes fascinates me.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Because he had a castle. I mean, come on.
Oh yeah. And Peter Curtin and Fritz Harman and Jurgens, the guy in the 1960s, but those cases hold more fascination for. I don't know why. I'm not a sick pervert. It just holds fast as to why they do things like this.
Right.
Why do you do things? Okay, well, let's go back to their childhood. Oh, yep, there it is.
I think what you and I like most, and I think maybe you'll agree with me, is like, it's not necessarily like, because the cases you and I both like are rich with detail.
Mm-hmm.
For example, you got Jack the Ripper, and everybody and their mom has written a book on Jack the Ripper. However, Dr. Petiot, for instance, I read the book about him that came out God knows how many years ago, but it just feels like there wasn't a lot of detail except for the aftermath. Like, we get to a little bit of his mystery murder room, but in all the sources I find, there's not a lot of detail telling you what he did in there, just the aftermath of the bones and the pit and the lie and the goop and all that.
Yeah, and the excuses.
Yeah, and the excuses. I mean, it's kind of funny that maybe the only thing interesting to me about the case is like when his house caught on fire and he rolled up on a bike pretending to be his brother, and he's like, "Oh, I'll go get him. See you, suckers." Like, that's kind of funny and interesting. But with H.H. Holmes, we got. I mean, you can probably download a schematic of his murder castle if you want to do it and imagine all the shit that went on in there. But when they talk about Dr. Petiot's little murder closet, it's like, if I'm remembering correctly, it's like shaped like a triangle and is like white walls. And there's a table and there's rings everywhere. And you go, well, let your mind go because we don't actually know what happened in here.
Yeah, I mean, and then you read about other people that could have Landru, Bluebeard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, a lot of the things that came out about him were more fiction than they were fact. He killed wives and things of that nature. How many cases do we run across where they actually murder where they sleep? You're looking at H.H. Holmes, okay, where he murdered where he slept, in the castle. Okay,
but he built a house around, like, because that's the thing. You've got two types of serial killers: the ones that are essentially a road show, where they go out and hunt victims, or we have the people who bring them to them. Like Gacy is one of them. H.H. Holmes,
Charles N.G. Out in California, yeah.
Anybody who lures you in, you could even say maybe Dahmer or anybody who brings them back is a different animal, I feel, to the person who's out. It's like a big game hunter. You can go out and bring your biggest gun and go where your prey is, and so all the evidence is out there. Or you can set a trap, have a nice little trail of corn, and you bring them to you.
It's a comfort zone.
Yeah,
it's a comfort zone. I mean, a lot of times You know, how many times Ed Kemper, you know, he was driving around with bodies in his car for days. Yeah. And, you know, who's comfortable with that? Somebody that actually decapitates their own mother.
Well, yeah, it's like, and then again with the mom stuff, like Ed Gein, right?
Mm-hmm.
He, like, there was no way, because everybody knew, like when what's her name, the first with that old lady, I can't remember her name, but when she disappears from the grocery store and like her son shows up with the key and there's blood everywhere, he goes, "It was that goddamn Eddie Gein." They all knew, and because like Ed Gein probably smelled like a corpse 24/7.
Oh God.
Oh yeah, I mean, you think about it. I mean, all the stuff that he made from these bodies that he was digging up, and you know, does anybody know something's wrong? I mean, come on, you know, you had to wait for two people to be missing before you actually went and investigated the guy. And you know, I mean, he had a chair made of skin, you know,
and a lamp and a wastebag, and not to divert too much, but like that was telegraphed from so early, like when his brother, was it Henry Gein? Mm-hmm. So when Ed Gein tells that story about how he hatched a plan to like do a controlled burn, and then he leads everybody back to where his dead brother is, and they go, well, he was hit in the head a bunch, but it was probably just smoke. Yeah. Oh
yeah.
Good enough. What?
Yeah, he had. Mm-hmm. One of the things. This is something, David and Krista, I think. I have run into as being into true crime, or studying true crime. Mm-hmm. There are people that I run into from high school that'll say, "Did you hear about so-and-so? There was a fire and their mother died in this fire, or their brother died of a heart attack, or their girlfriend." I know somebody right now who 3 people died around this one person within a year. Yeah. And the only thing in my mind is going, okay, how did he do it?
Right.
How did he do it?
That must be just a natural byproduct of being into true crime, because back in the old days, maybe 10 years ago, there was someone in not my immediate family, but married into the family, whose husband died mysteriously for no reason. And then the next person they got involved with, who was my family member, got sick. And you want to go, what?
Well, this one person and I'm not going to mention any names because I can't prove it. But it was, you know, like allegedly. I said, you know, where there's smoke, there's freaking inferno.
Right.
Okay. First, his brother dies of a heart attack. Then the girl that he shacked up with, who was a friend of mine that I knew, she was in pretty decent health. I mean, for a 52, 53-year-old woman. Mm-hmm. Pretty girl. She would not date him, this guy in high school. But later on, she dated him. Okay, he was kind of like a hanger-on, you know, just follow her around and stuff. She dies in her sleep of a heart attack.
Right.
Okay. Then there's a fire at his house.
Oy.
And his mother dies. And the guy's not there. Here I go start asking questions. Okay, was there smoke in the mother's lungs?
Right.
So life insurance policy.
Yeah, exactly.
You always,
the house was demolished.
You can't help it though, because if you're of this proclivity, anything that happens out of the ordinary, you go, "Oh my God, there's something sinister." Like when
but you learn to connect the dots, though, David.
Yeah.
You learn to connect them somewhat. You know, maybe I'm just being a mean old bastard that didn't like the guy, but you know, I just think things are suspicious. And why wasn't there any questioning done here? He was in the bed with the girl. When he woke up, she was dead. Okay, as a detective, I'd be sitting him in a chair, right, and talking to him.
There was a famous case, and maybe you remember, maybe you don't, but like I think it even happened on the Tom Likas show, where, because there's a clip of it on YouTube where this woman calls and she's like, basically describes how she murdered her husband. She goes, well, check this out, Tom. She goes, oh, he came home. He was like an Iraq vet or something. And his death got ruled a suicide because he got shot point blank in the heart. And so she goes, well, guess what? I'm a nurse. I know how to make it look like suicide, and I killed him. And you'll never find me, she tells Tom Likas. And he goes, we have your number, right? And she goes, click. And guess who went to jail for killing her goddamn husband?
An idiot.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. The whole thing is, but, of all the times we studied true crime, you and I'm sure, we have never found the perfect crime. Where somebody, well, actually, if you look at Jack the Ripper, okay, if you look at, I think the Lindbergh kidnapping, that was a perfect crime in some way. But we haven't found one where somebody thinks they commit the perfect crime and then they get away with it.
Well,
and then,
but here's the thing about that, though. It gets dicey because you say, okay, there's no such thing as a perfect crime. Meanwhile, if you look at the statistics, like at best, between 20 and 40% of murders are solved.
Yeah.
So that gives an 80 to 60% chance of you committing the perfect crime. Like all you have to do is, here's the thing, because when you look at the MOs and the police tactics that everybody uses in every precinct, it's like closest first, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, family. If you're one of these people like Mark Goudeau, who just kills strangers, you can rack up high double digits before you get caught. And if Mark Goudeau, local killer, had stopped at 12, no one would ever know.
How many did he wind up killing?
Oh, God, I don't remember. But
I don't know why 18 comes to my head, but it could have been in
it was
his
some
20s.
high number. And he did not get caught until he walked up to some lady at a car wash who was on the phone with her boyfriend, tons of goddamn witnesses around, and he goes, oh yeah, and he puts a gun to her head and pop, and they go, oh, it's that guy, and we go, oh yeah, plus he left DNA all over the goddamn place because it's present. It's not the 30s anymore. We know fingerprints, we know DNA, we can do all of that now.
Well, there was something I read a while back about DNA, that DNA can be manufactured.
Yeah, which is scary.
Which is scary because you could frame anybody if you do that.
That happens in an SVU case.
Yep.
Law and Order.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I don't know of anything that, any cases where they do that because they use DNA. DNA, I mean, you leave it wherever you go.
Right.
So it's fairly easy. I mean, I can't imagine the scientists wanting to use that in a court case, how to convince the judge, to admit it, because science changes faster than the evidence rules, the rules of evidence. So I always
internet
thought
taught us
maybe in
that.
my old age, you see, in Louisiana, you can go to law school free after you're 65.
Oh,
and
wow.
I thought about doing that once I go, well, I got 8 more years. So if I make it. So I thought about doing that. And my youth I did. But my wife goes, what would you do? I said, study criminals.
Right.
Yeah,
What else would I do? Come on, I'm going to study criminals.
Fascinating.
So I have a question. It's totally off topic, but it was regarding DNA. So do you guys know if it's true? So when a police officer pulls somebody over, I've watched so many videos of this, and I want to know if it's true. And they touch the back of the car before they go to the driver's window. Is it because to leave fingerprints in case something happens to them?
Probably.
I'm going to say yes.
Because that's
That was probably the body cam before body cam, right?
Maybe.
There has to be some. Well, the thing is that they didn't have car cams either, the
Right.
dash cams. Okay, and a lot of times, cops were being killed or run over, and they couldn't identify anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think when I was in the academy, they didn't tell us to do that, but they still do it. As a matter of fact,
Yeah.
if you look at it, they still do it.
Yeah, there's a ton. That's like the present videos that I've watched because somebody posted, I don't know where, and then there's all these slew of comments of people that don't know their head from their ass, and they're like, "Oh, it's to feel if there's a body in the trunk," and people are also saying,
"How do you feel? Is there a body in a trunk by touching?"
You're gonna
There's
feel
vibration,
warmth of a
like,
dead body through a trunk lid. Yeah, there's probably a lot of stuff like that is vestigial. Like it's like the appendix. I'm sure a lot of cops are taught to do things or just do things out of habit.
Yeah.
Because they predate technology.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
But yeah, I can't
Makes
imagine.
sense.
It would be like, because if you got no camera, it's you and a notepad, right? I would be touching the shit
Actually,
out of
not
that car.
necessarily a notepad.
Right.
When you walk up to that car, your belt is unhooked.
Right.
Your holster is unhooked. What I used to do is they had what they call a PR-24, and it's about that long, and it's got a handle on the side of it. And it's actually an ancient Japanese tool to crush rice, but we learned how to use it in the academy. And I used to stand there whenever I pulled somebody over. I never had a problem. The whole time I was a police officer, I only had to draw my weapon one time.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that's before crime really started getting bad.
Right.
But the thing is that be prepared for anything, even a little old lady. Okay, I mean, you're not going to beat the crap out of a little old lady. I mean, unless she pulls a weapon on you.
She can have a stiletto, man.
Yeah, I know. But it never really happened that way. But you come on a car full of teenagers, they think they're indestructible. And so you're going to have to pull one of them out the car and let me have your license and registration. Oh man, and that's non-compliance.
Yeah.
Okay. And everybody says, well, the cops use excessive force. Some cops do, but comply. When
Right.
they ask you to do something, comply.
In if nothing else, real life will teach you this. You don't have to be a fan of true crime. You don't have to be into the police culture. Just know this based on you being alive and a human being. They've got a gun. They've got a badge. Do everything you're supposed to so you don't get a fucking knee in your neck and you're dead, right?
Oh, yeah.
I would rather get hit in the knee with a billy club based on, whatever. Somebody thinks I'm a murderer. I had a friend who got, back in the old days, he got pulled over because he happened to be driving a car that was exactly like the car of a man who just robbed a bank and shot a dude. So they lit him up with lights and sirens, and he pulled over and put his hands out the window. Do that. You do not know what is happening. Comply. If you feel like some shit is going wrong, worry about that later. Stay alive. Stay happy now.
Oh, I mean, we could talk about, police culture as well. That's a show in itself.
Yeah.
But the thing is that, you can't claim if they got it on film that you did something wrong. You can't claim the cop was a racist or he was brutal. All right. Yeah. It doesn't work that way. And, but if you scream loud enough, squeaky wheel gets the grease. But, I was a correctional officer and a patrol officer in a city that was 60% black and 40% white at the time. Okay. The bulk of our arrests were people of color because that's the area that we worked, Yeah. But and the thing is that, I always tell my students, I teach at a predominantly black university. I tell my students, I said, look, I don't see skin color. I see ability. If you've got the ability, okay, right, then we have no problems. Okay. But if you start claiming that I'm this and I'm that and I'm a racist and stuff, you've lost me. You've lost the argument. Okay.
This facet of whatever true crime or criminal justice is the same all over the world. It's a microcosm of God dang, what is it? How do I want to say it? It's a war. It's a Cold War essentially. The predator gets smarter to eat the prey. The prey gets faster or smarter or gets horns or whatever. That's we have our criminal justice system. We have criminals who, are trying their damnedest to work around and work through and yada, yada, yada. And a criminal justice system on the ass end of that trying to keep up. And so it's this war of building up different barriers that they just keep sneaking around. Mm-hmm. And that's just the way it is. We're always, as a species, and even as a life itself, whether you're a human looking to do something dickish and not get caught by the police, or you're a gazelle on the Serengeti who wants to eat some delicious clover without getting their ass eaten by a lion, it's the same technique.
Well, actually, you might have missed something there. One side plays by the rules.
That's right. That's right.
The other doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay. And the thing is, if we start not playing by the rules, then we're just as bad as they are.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I always tell, I teach the Constitution in my history class. And, every time I get to the Fourth Amendment, it talks about illegal search and seizure. What is probable cause? And every time, well, I had a cousin that, he did this and did that, and the cops still arrested him,
Anecdotal evidence is hilarious.
Okay, stop this. Okay, this is how it works. If they have probable cause, which is subjective, and they can search the car, they don't need a warrant. Okay,
yeah,
it's probable cause. But when you try to teach that to people that have been living in a society their whole lives where cops really don't play by the rules, then they don't respect the legal system. I don't know where we went wrong on this one, David.
It's all true crime. It's all part of true crime. This is true. Okay. It's also related to crime. But that's part of it too, is like, the heyday of the serial killer, let's say, died in the 80s. You can say some trailed off to the 90s, but by and large, you couldn't do the things that BTK, that the Green River, that the Axeman, that any of these people did, because it predates like maybe easy access to firearms, maybe there's no DNA, maybe it predates fingerprints. We've got we had a big circle, right, of crime, because law enforcement had very few tools, and now the crime circle has shrunk and the law enforcement circle has grown because now we have ways of proving things, whereas before you would just say, hey, did you see this guy do it? And they go, yeah, I guess.
But then the criminal mind evolves.
Right.
So that you might need more crime fighting tools, like we got white collar crime now. Look at, cyber criminals.
Oh, for sure.
Long stretch from the Axeman, but we've got cyber criminals, we've got white collar criminals, people that can steal your house,
or even people like, oh god, what was the lady who, oh, god dang it, she basically that long con of like the Edison, where that small box could take a drop of your blood and test a million disease. I think Elizabeth Holmes or something. She just went to jail recently. That's the only reason I bring it up. But she did that shit. Nobody was necessarily hurt or killed. She was just a dick and a liar to everyone everywhere. And if, she's like, I want to be like Steve Jobs. And at first they fight you, and then they do this, and then they say you're their hero. But that only works if you're not a fucking criminal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, do we call CEOs criminals? I mean, come on, if we want to get into that, but I don't see where we're ever going to, and this may sound defeatist, we're ever going to catch up with the criminals.
No,
I don't see where we're ever going to.
We're on a constant striving for not equality, but like equanimity. We want everybody who gets slighted to get some sort of recompense and or a little sticker that says, hey, the justice system said that they were bad guys. All these people who, and I keep in mind, I've not had a close family member murdered, so I don't know how I would act in this case, or the situation rather, but all these families who go, justice was served, and, but here's the thing. They say that into a microphone anywhere between 1 to 10 years after their family member is dead. Their murderer lived 1 to 10 years out of jail. And they go, well, yeah, everything is made right. No.
Well, okay. Well, let's look at Clementine Barnabet, for example.
Sure.
She gets life in prison. But due to a law that was passed in 1901 in Louisiana, she gets released in 1923. So she only did, 11 years in jail, and then she disappears into history.
It's
okay.
Bonkers.
48 people she killed or she was responsible for, and she only gets 11 years. You know, do we go back to thinking about, public hangings, public executions?
Woof, yeah.
Does it deter anybody from committing murder? Let's give it a shot. It used to.
Here's the thing about, because corporal punishment is everybody's big hot button issue when it comes to true crime, right? Because you say, well, I'm a pro or con corporal punishment. But you say, but certain circumstances, let's like the monster of the Andes, who by his own records killed upwards of 300 to 400 children. Mm-hmm. He gets 4 years in a Peruvian jail. He gets 6 years in a Colombian jail. No punishment will ever be good for everybody, because, like, let's say Ed Gein, for instance, he kills that old lady in the shop. She was in her 70s. So you say, well, okay, so where's the gray area? If you kill a child from 0 to 10, they had a lot more life to live than someone who's in their 70s. So where does the punishment fit? It's all just sort of the sliding scale of the slide whistle of cosmic justice. And we go, well, you killed someone and you get 11 years. We'll see you then. You can still catch the Super Bowl.
A lot of times, like, for instance, they used to have the death penalty in Europe. Mm-hmm. They don't have it anymore. All right. Why not? Why don't you?
It was the pendulum, right? Because they.
Oh yeah, it's the pendulum. It's that right-left pendulum thing that keeps swinging back and forth. Well, let me explain it to you in monetary terms. In the state of Louisiana, we spend $58,000 per year per inmate to keep someone in prison. Mm. If they're on death row, and this is the one thing, if we look at appeals, okay, let's look at Andre Chikatilo.
Sure. Crazy
Andre
dude.
Chikatilo, convicted of murdering 52 children and young adults.
Okay. That was nuts.
1 week. He was on death row 1 week, and they brought him into a room with a drain and put a 17-cent bullet in the back of his head. That's justice, okay? Because they saved the taxpayer money. The longer these people stay in prison, the longer the memory lasts of what they did.
And then you got to do like parole for the family if that comes up every 2 years, because all these old archaic laws. But you can kind of see where it comes from, because you bring up Europe. So like the idea of crime was happening before the idea of prisons. So they go, oh, well, you stole some eggs, off with his head, because where are we going to put him?
Exactly.
Now we're so like that pendulum started up here, right? Where you go, okay, any crime, guess what? We're going to kill you. Then they go, we still build prisons, so the death penalty goes down. Then we abolish it, and we're all the way back up here. But I feel like eventually, and I don't feel like, I know because things move in cycles, people are eventually going to break apart and be like, you know what? We're tired of housing these people. But then, I don't know, it's so dicey. Because there are so many, if you look into it even for a second, the amount of innocent people executed is staggering.
Okay. Are these people completely innocent? Or
right.
Just at the wrong place at the wrong time?
It's an infinite number of shades of gray.
Exactly.
And we're never going to get to the right answer, I don't think.
No, we never will.
No.
We never will. I mean, the thing is that a lot of people can be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
And that's how they get. Now, how did they get there? Well, they weren't following the rules in some particular instance. I'm not saying they should stay there. Okay.
Right.
But what I am saying is that, innocent people, now we have the technology to where we can get innocent people off from being like on death row or anything like that, or from murder. I mean, it's happened.
Yeah. DNA has exonerated a lot of people. Some it was too late for, some it was just in time for.
And false accusations too. I mean, people after a while, false accusations, they say, oh, I felt guilty, and kind of like Mrs. Miglia, I felt guilty about it, whether she was forced or not, and decided, hey, I'm going to come clean, and these guys are going to get off. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we could sit here and debate the criminal justice system for days. I mean, as part of it's for so long.
It's just yet another juicy vein and full of all these nuggets to go over in the true crime genre. But as I'm looking at the clock here, I have blown almost 2 hours. Well, 2 hours minus 30 seconds of your time. So why don't we start wrapping it up?
Okay.
This has been incredibly enjoyable. So you know how we do it on this
I
show.
just wish, is Krista bored back there? Because she looks like she's bored. She's doing her nails. What is she doing back there?
She's keeping an eye on the chat just to make sure everybody is taken care of. But let's do some staff recommendations. And I feel like the obvious ones are, number one, True Crime, Man's Dark Imagination. There's a link in this video. The first link below the description is to Alan's show here. Check it out. Also, give me the names of your books and where to get them again real quick. So if people are juiced up, they can get them.
Dark Bayou, Infamous Louisiana Homicides. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it on Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. Bloodstained Louisiana, 12 murder cases from 1896 to 1934. And this fall will be Southern Evil.
Nice.
That still has to be edited. It's kind of branches out from Louisiana a little bit. And, of course, Italian Louisiana, which has a lot of stories in it, crime stories in it, talking about the Italians who settled in Louisiana. So, and they can be found at, like I said, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million.
Something about, true crime is interesting. Personally, I'm getting up on my soapbox here, but true crime is not always, is by and large interesting. But personally, I love that Southern flavor. It's something about a serial killer on a bayou or in a swamp or in some Southern locale is so fascinating to me. Because if you were to be like, well, here up in Connecticut, there was a guy and he hung out in a house and he killed a bunch of people. Part of what draws us to true crime is the setting, the context, and Louisiana is a beautiful atmosphere.
Well, in the South, a lot of in other parts of the country, people hide their crazy. Mm-hmm. We give ours a mint julep and put them on the porch. Okay, that's what we do.
Guess what? You're crazy. It's nice out here.
Yeah. So, but I want to thank you guys for allowing me this opportunity. I really, really enjoyed it.
No, I mean, thank you for coming on.
I'm
because
old. I don't do much on a Friday night anyway. So, but I appreciate the time and folks, anybody listening out there, you might want to catch the episodes that Krista narrated, and the one that David narrated should be coming up within about a week. After I get the video done, and hopefully everybody will enjoy it. It's like I said, it's a remix of an earlier one having to do with basically a mafia kidnapping and murder that was really affected the city for over 100 years.
Yeah, my flavor for true crime has never been like organized crime, but it's a whole different animal because when you have like a murderer per se, like the show, and they go out and kill a whole bunch of people indiscriminately, or they have a certain flavor of types of person, like the disposable or whatever. There's a different aspect of organized crime because there are rules and regulations and respect to a degree, but you're still doing things that are, pretty shitty.
Oh yeah. But the one thing about the true crime, if you do things in a chronological order, it's easy. Okay, if you jump, like somebody says, hey, why don't you do something on serial killers that use a baseball bat or something? That's hard to research everything that comes across. But when you and I talked the last time about Jack the Ripper being so thick and meaty all the time, with the different theories and all. I went and I looked for what some of these people talk about, these suspects, and those stories are very meaty. and that's the kind of things that I want to bring to the audience. But I don't want to bring it with a British accent, because the people they sit there, oh Lord, look at you. Oh yes, he murdered these 8,
Yeah, I tried that. It didn't go well.
They're kind of stuck up a little bit, They're not, typical New Orleans yatty going, yeah, well, he took out a knife and cut a truck, But it's kind of those things, and you'll never run out of material, like I said before. So, but
that's it too. I think that it part of what people come to this for is the local flavor, because especially in a place like New Orleans, not to go back to that so heavily, but when you've got these hubs of culture, when you've got like Florida is a disaster constantly.
yeah,
it's just the way it is. If you've got over 3 cultures coming together, contributing religion, contributing social norms, contributing yada, 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 yada. You go, oh my God, it's such a spaghetti mess of tangled Christmas lights. You go, I want to unravel that.
Oh, yeah.
Anytime it's a straight shot and they go, well, it was for the insurance. I go, yawn, click.
Yeah. It's a tangled web. There's a lot of tangled webs. The other day I was watching something on YouTube about the vampire tour that they have down here, which is pure bullshit.
Yeah.
Because it's none of it. They'll go, oh, and this is a true story. No, it's not. Okay, because I researched it. I went on the vampire tour 20 years ago and took notes because I was looking for an article to write.
Totally.
And couldn't find crap on it. So I just, I said, God, you people, it's touristy. I don't like things that are too touristy.
Ghost tours and murder tours are fun, but you have to realize you're basically paying your money to watch a Michael Bay-esque, in terms of reality, like it might as well be written by Michael Bay, because whether you're going to hear about ghosts or murders, the shit that they're shoveling is like basically what's on the pamphlet.
Mm-hmm. Oh. I always thought I could make a lot of money doing crime scene tours, because there's so many crimes down here, famous ones in New Orleans. But then again, you might get, a real sicko, I mean, and you got to do them at night. You can't do them during the day. So, but it's just a matter of, the mixture of the cultures and, like you said, the religion and the food. And also everybody wants to come. A lot of people want to come to New Orleans.
I do. I want to visit. That's on my bucket list.
It seems like a cool place. That's the thing. The locale, if it's a cool place, it'll kick the case up another whole level. Like the ones that happen here in Arizona, pretty boring. I only care about them because they were here in Arizona.
I was born and raised in Connecticut, and I know 0 of serial killers in Connecticut.
Connecticut's kind of boring. It doesn't have the South flavor. You don't have the Southwest of the Arizona.
It's got nothing.
Cactus.
Oh, yeah.
It's just.
Well, you had the what was it? The trunk killings in Arizona.
Oh yeah.
And there was another guy, I can't remember his name. In Tucson, he murdered.
He shot Gabby Giffords. Are you talking about him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
He killed like between 4. If my memory is shit, but he killed between 4 and 6 people and wounded Gabby Gifford. And not for nothing, I didn't realize, but her husband, Mark, whatever. He's our state senator.
Kelly.
Mark Kelly. Mark Kelly was Gabby Gifford's husband, and he's in the Senate now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The amazing true crime, like you jump into true crime and then just happen into regular culture all by itself.
There's all these connections. There's a lot of connections when you look at true. When you look at true, a lot of the times.
Yeah, we live in a web.
In Louisiana. When you look down here, when you look at, like I said, I mentioned the Hennessy assassination. There's a lot of political connections in that, and it's everything sticks in rich history. Like I said, the Italians, they just got an apology 2 years ago from the mayor of New Orleans for that lynching. They just got an apology. And it was over 130 years ago. That's
another hilarious part of like the law enforcement criminal justice side of things, where like a murderer can murder a whole bunch of people, go to the grave, never saying they're sorry, but people will still cry to the government to be like, you never said you were sorry for that thing you did 400 years ago. Because the government lasts forever, but a murder like Ed Gein, dead. You can't be like, Ed, please say you're sorry. He's dead.
Yeah, it's I don't think when a murderer apologizes to the victims' families that it actually brings any closure.
No,
I don't think they're actually contrite when they do it.
It's a pantomime. They're doing it for whatever their reason is. That's why they're doing it. No one is doing it because they're like, oh, you know what? Killing 37 people was a bad thing. My bad, dudes. And then you like write out a bunch of sorry notes and send them.
Yeah, can I get out of prison in 5 years?
Yeah. Depending on where you get sent up, you might. Anyway, guys, everybody who stayed around or who's watching this in the future, thank you. Be sure to check out Alan's show. There is a link in the description below this video, and our merch and stuff is also down there too if you have time. But Alan, once again, thank you so much. It is always a pleasure interacting with you, and I love true crime, so we're gonna have to do this again.
Oh, I'm hoping so. I'm hoping so. This is a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I'd like to do it on my show. Bring you on my show, maybe in the future.
I'm not above being a guest. I could be, a co-host. I could even be in the green room eating all the bagels. It doesn't matter. Okay. I'll show up.
I'm hungry now, man. If something's open, but I enjoyed it. I enjoy talking to you and her, that woman. Krista. Yeah, Krista, yeah. I'm sorry, it's late here.
It's all right.
Go home and get your fucking shine box.
Okay.
All right, guys. Alan, once again, thanks so much. Everybody, I really appreciate you coming. Baked Salmon, Dee Dee, everybody, Matt, whoever showed up and didn't talk but still showed up, thank you. We're going to do this again, hopefully soon, if we can get another nice, juicy true crime. But we'll see you next time on an episode of whatever this is. It is live, and we'll catch you on the next one.
For the